with our presentation over the digestive system, right? So hopefully you've, of course, read the chapter, whether you're using this video because you're absent or because school's closed. Okay, here it is. So chapter 15, the digestive system, right? So we have covered a lot of organ systems up to this point. Our goal being to understand how do critters, you and I, stay alive, right? So we know how materials get transported. Okay, they get transported by the circulatory system, all right? And what tells the circulatory system to transport things and when to transport them? Well, that's the endocrine system. How does the endocrine system know when to react? Well, that's the nervous system. Nervous system is also controlling the muscular system, but all of these things, these systems we've talked about, are dependent on the digestive system. They're dependent on nutrients, and this is how they get from our food and into our body in a form that our bodies can use them. All right, so functions. All right, functions. Number one, mechanical and chemical breakdown of food and absorption of nutrients. Okay, so first, we have to mechanically break it down. How do we do that? Yep, we chew it up. So before we had teeth, our parents chewed it up for us, whether it be in a food processor or with baby food, right? So it was mechanically broken down, so when it got into your stomach didn't have to do as much of a job chemically breaking it down, all right? So adding stomach acids, and then actually that continues to happen inside of the small intestine. And then once it passes through the stomach, and actually there's some things that are absorbed in the stomach, but after it passes into the small intestine, then the nutrients are absorbed, and they're absorbed and then transported by the circulatory system. All right, this digestive system consists of the alimentary canal and accessory organs. All right, alimentary canal. So early on in development, your whole digestive system is one long tube. All right, and then it elongates and invaginates into all of these different organs. But that's why it's continuum all the way from mouth to anus. And they differentiated along the way, but they did start as one long tube. All right, so this video actually kind of highlights that transformation. All right, so early on, we were a teeny tiny embryo, and that embryo, let's see if I can. Started folding. All right, so you can see we actually have different forms of material. So this is eventually going to be our heart. We have what's going to be our outside and what's going to be the inside. So this is the interior material. I'm actually going to take this on YouTube so I can fast forward through it. Of course, we have an ad.
Writing's not that easy, but Grammarly can help. This sentence is grammatically correct.
Okay, so you can see things are folding. So what's doing is it's going to fold around. We're going to have this red is going to eventually become muscle. All right, so there's the embryonic gut tube. All right, so we should be able to see it here from the side here in a minute. So things are folding. What I want to see is this. Okay, so this tube differentiates. All right, so that eventually this little bigger piece is eventually going to become the stomach. Okay, it's just going to take on shape. And then here is the whole alimentary canal. All right, so from mouth to anus. So all these little buds are going to become organs along the way. All right, so they have it labeled for us. You can see it folding, right? And these organs, this small intestine folds and it also twists. That's why it gets all twisted in there. But it's twisted up, but it's not a knotted. I mean, so you can see the pancreas. Here's going to be the pancreas. Here is the, of course, the stomach, the small intestine, and then the large intestine, and it all folded from the same material. All right, so the pancreas formed. And you see it's twisting. All right, so watch the stomach. This is what I was talking about. It's going to start spinning. And what it's doing is it's growing, and it's growing faster than the space can hold. So it's going to fold up. You're going to like taking a piece of paper, and if you shove it together, it's going to crinkle. All right, that's what the small intestine does, and it occupies that space. You can see it all moving, and there now looks exactly like almost like a digestive system. So that's how the digestive system forms, but it all comes from the same materials. Now, all of these materials within the stomach and the intestines have the whole alimentary canal has these 4 different levels, all right? The mucosa, the submucosa, the muscular layer, and the serosa. All right, so the mucosa, that is the very middle, all right? And it's going to be having like the cilia and the microvilli. It protects the tissues, but it also carries on absorption. Okay, so that's where the sugars and fats and lipids, water get moved through this epithelial tissue and then into the blood. All right, and the submucosa is where the blood vessels are. All right, so that's going to, of course, first going to be capillaries, so it can easily diffuse, and it's going to diffuse out and then into the blood, and then it can be transported to wherever it's needed. And also nerves, all right, to tell it when to absorb and when to not absorb. The muscular layer, all right, this is going to allow it to, just like the blood vessels could constrict and dilate. Okay, it's going to do the same thing, and it's able to do that to push food along, right? Gravity does not push food, okay? You can swallow upside down, and if you were hung upside down, for whatever reason, your body, if you were fed food, your body could move it from your mouth to the exit. It would take a little more time, but it could happen. And then the serosa, it's the visceral being an outside layer of the cavity. Peritoneum, it lubricates the surface and lets those organs, because they will slide past each other inside of your gut. All right, so here's another image, right? So the mucosa, you can kind of see the evaginations, the indents and things, all right? So that's where the food, water, minerals is going to get absorbed. And then we have our muscle layer, all right? So it can dilate, constrict, and that's how it moves food. The submucosa, that's where the blood vessels are. And of course, it's going to have to go through the muscle layer. And then we have the serosa, which is going to lubricate. It's the peritoneum. All right, so the mixing movements. Okay, this is what I was talking about, peristalsis. All right, the alimentary canal is able to, number 1, mix your food. Number 2, move it. All right, so the stomach, that's what it's doing. It's moving around. You can hear it when your food, when your stomach gets empty. You hear the gurgling. Okay, that's the last of the food going out. But your stomach continually does like a kneading motion. Think about like kneading dough. Okay, you knead dough and you fold it over, and you knead it and you fold it over. Well, you do that to get all the materials mixed in. You want to make sure all the yeast is everywhere throughout the dough so it all rises. Make sure the sugar is all mixed up so the dough will all taste the same. Another one you really want to make sure it's mixed is the salt. Otherwise, one end will be really salty and the other end will be kind of bland. But so this mixing movement is able to mix the food with the digestive juices. All right, and so because that helps that's what your body does after you chewed it up. Okay, that broke it down from big pieces so you could swallow it to smaller pieces. And then the smaller pieces, think back to chemistry a year before, unless we haven't got to that point yet, and you're currently in chemistry, if you increase the surface area, it increases the rate of reactions. Okay, we want to get that food through and quickly to our bloodstream so it can be useful to us. So if we chew it up smaller, it's able to react more quickly. Then we have peristalsis, this moving. So think about the way I like to describe it. It's kind of like a toothpaste tube. The most efficient way to squeeze toothpaste out is by the end, right? So if this is your cap, you take the cap off, you squeeze in the middle, the food is going to go this way and this way. But if you squeeze at the end, if you think about again, that metaphor of the toothpaste, okay, it's going to push all the toothpaste in. And eventually, you won't have to do that thing where you're squeezing the toothpaste all the way to the end, right? That's essentially peristalsis. You're squeezing it all the way to the tip so it'll go out, right? So right here, those it's a smooth muscle, so they're made in rings. Those rings constrict, and then it squeezes the food forward. And as this one constricts, this one has to dilate to give room for it. All right, and this pushes food from your esophagus all the way to the end. Now, here's a video of it.
The muscularis layer of the GI tract possesses an outer longitudinal layer of smooth
Okay,
muscle.
so this part
The
is
smooth muscle,
constricting, this
the
part's
longitudinal
dilating,
layer
and you can see
contracts
it
immediately
moving
before
down.
a bolus. So as
And you have the link to this so you can watch the full video. All right, so, but first, before we get into the stomach, we have to mechanically break it down. So within our mouth, we have our teeth, we have the gums, which support the teeth. Teeth is a living bone. Okay, it's got blood vessels inside of it. It has the osteocytes, osteoblasts, osteoclasts. And the mouth is where, I guess, all of these things are contained. So it's going to be chewing and mixing saliva. Saliva is the very first part of the chemical reactions. The saliva actually helps break down the sugars. And so, like, you're like, if you're thinking about, like, right now, we're talking about food, my mouth's starting to drool a little bit, or like a dog when you hold their treat out and they drool. It's because their brain is saying, hey, that's coming. We need to get ready for it, because otherwise it'd be dry right away. So that's kind of a parasympathetic response. So the saliva starts so that it can lubricate the food to get down through the esophagus, but also starts breaking it down. All right, we have our tongue. The tongue, of course, helps us taste. The reason taste is important, some foods are poisonous, and if they taste bad, it might poison us. Like a rotten banana could make you sick because it's got a certain level of bacteria in it. Or if it's not quite ripe, it won't be as sweet because you wouldn't get as much nutrition from it because it doesn't have as much sugar in it. And this tongue, of course, is connected to the flora of your mouth by the frenulum. And of course, our tongue has the papillae. That's the little bumps, and that is where your taste buds are found. Okay, a lot of our chewing also occurs on the roof of our mouth. We don't even realize it, but this palate, the palatine bone, remember that? It starts there and goes all the way to the back, forms the roof of the cavity. It's got it's harder spot toward the front, and then it gets a little softer toward the back. If you think about looking at the skull, all right, a lot of that is actually soft tissue. We know that because it was gone when we looked at the skull. At the very back is the uvula. And it has to do with swallowing motion. But even this palate, it's so important for chewing. Like my cat Zoe, all she has is her front teeth, her incisors, and yet she's able to chew her food because she just mashes it in the back here, where she doesn't have any molars anymore, against that palate. So even individuals who don't have teeth anymore, if they have softer foods, they can still kind of mash it up. Their tongue pushes. You don't even realize it, but your tongue pushes up against the top of your palate. But also, you're going to have, of course, this bone where the teeth should be or should have been. Okay, and we got the tonsils in the back as part of our immune system. This is where we get infections, strep throat. Right, some of us have to sometimes have those removed if they get infected too often. That's what tonsillitis is. This tonsil is it's a hole in the back of your throat. If they get inflamed, they cause that sore throat, and eventually we might have to get removed. All right, so here are all of our teeth. You know they had names, right? So these first four on the top and the bottom are called incisors, and they're in between your canines. So yes, we do have canines, and some of our canines are sharper than others. And if you're like me and you grind your teeth at night for whatever reason, okay, those incisors get tore down. And then we have molars. We have premolars, and then there's two premolars, and then there's, depending on if you've had them removed or not, if they come in, you have your other molars. Premolars and molars are for grinding. So incisors are for cutting, and then the molars are for grinding. What do you think the canines are for? Why would we have canines? Why does a dog have canines? A bear? It's actually so they can grip their food. And the ones whose food is going to run away from them, they need larger canines because they bite into them. Whatever they bit, it's going to be like, ow, you bit me. They're going to try to run away. And if they just have smooth teeth like we do, if I bite you, I can pull out pretty easily. But if you have canines and that penetrates the skin, then they're not going to get away. So that would be the purpose for canines. And why we don't have them anymore, because throughout evolution of our species, we've become more hunters and gatherers, but our hunting has been with spears and tools rather than our teeth. And yeah, you actually do have your teeth replaced. Why do you think we have to have these teeth replaced? Well, think about how big your head is compared to how big your head was when you were 2, when you got your teeth, right? Imagine what you would look like if you still had all your baby teeth. You had teeny tiny teeth. That's why you had buck teeth when you were first growing up, because these teeth here have not gotten any bigger since they first came in. So the primary teeth are called your baby teeth. That's what you get at first. And we have new teeth come in because our teeth they not grow anymore, right? They're a living tissue, but they don't grow anymore. So to accommodate our mouth at the very beginning could not have accommodated all our baby teeth, or excuse me, our secondary teeth. And yeah, they are up there growing. And as they grow, these roots are going to get dissolved. Thank you, right, osteoclasts. Osteoclasts dissolve the roots. And eventually they just break off, and then those teeth are forming up inside of your maxilla, and then they come on down. So a better picture of the teeth, all right? So you can see why these flat teeth would be a lot better at grinding and chewing than these would. And you can chew in the front of your mouth, but it's going to take you a long time to chew. Okay, so our bones and our teeth have really similar parts as our other bones. We have an outer side, which is going to have a lot more calcium and going to not be as changing as often. Okay, this is called your enamel. This is what wears down. Okay, you grind it, and once it's gone, it's gone. Okay, you can't replace it. That's why I should be wearing a mouth guard at night. And also, this is what the bacteria eat when you get an infection. Eventually, they get into this dentin, which is kind of a softer material, and it is going to be supported by blood vessels and nerves. That's how you know you have a cavity when it hurts, because there's nerves up inside of that bone, that tooth, just like there is the nerves. We were talking about nerves running through the fossas of our bones when we talk about the skeletal system. So the root is what holds the tooth in, and it's all surrounded by gums, this soft tissue. And this can also be worn down and broken apart depending on bacteria. So a gingivitis is just a function of your gums being inflamed. And an indication of gingivitis is the discoloration, right? So if they're a little lighter colored, you probably need to start using some mouthwash or make sure you're brushing up here. But at the same time, if you're brushing them too hard, if you prefer medium or hard bristled toothbrushes, that's actually kind of hard on your gums. So my dentist, they always recommend a soft bristle, and just make sure you brush your teeth well and often, and floss, because you got to get the bacteria out from under here and actually what you're getting out is the food for the bacteria. Because if there's food there, they grow. If there's no food, they're not going to grow. That's what causes that tooth decay. Is that food is left there, the bacteria is like, ooh, num, 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 num. And as they are eating the food, they actually release toxins that are acidic, and our bones are made of calcium, right? Calcium carbonate. We had acid to calcium carbonate in chemistry class. What happened? It reacted, it fizzled. Okay, so yeah, make sure we brush our teeth. So actually, a root canal, what they're doing is the bacterial infection has got down to this infected pulp, and in a root canal, they take it all out and they fill it with medicine, and it's actually, the tooth is not going to be really alive anymore, but it's not going to be dead. So here's a video you can access on your own time. All right, so these are our wisdom teeth. Okay, so if you look at pictures of like a Neanderthal versus us, here, I'll pull up one actually. Neanderthal versus human jaw. All right, used to have a much bigger jaw. Okay, they had room for all of the teeth. Let me move my face. Okay, you can see how bigger their jaw is. All right, they had even space in between their teeth. That is why we still have those what are called wisdom teeth. I don't know why they're called wisdom teeth. They hurt, and they cause you just a lot of pain. So there's another fossil evidence of evolution. All right, we still have those teeth, even though we don't have any use for them. And actually, typically, we have to have them removed because they hurt. And the reason they hurt is because when they come in, we don't have space for them. So if they're erupted, that means they're coming up, and they'll go through the gums. And there's actually different categories of these teeth, and they grow in all different directions. And the reason they grow that direction, because right here, it's the size of your mandible. So people that have a bigger jaw, they actually can sometimes keep their wisdom teeth. Typically, doctors recommend having them removed, because it's a long ways back there to brush. You don't really realize it, but it's a long ways back there to brush. And so typically those are the teeth that get infected with cavities. So typically are removed, and they can grow they can go out, they can grow down. It's crazy the directions they do. And you can think about how painful this is going to be. It's going to be a slow process when it's growing in, but if they're impacting other teeth, they're going to cause damage. And so usually they'll try to remove them before they actually cause any damage. I had mine done. Mine were done but while they were erupting. So I was able to, they put me out, anesthesiologist, and they actually had a hole. I had a hole in the back of my jaw. They sewed it shut, and eventually that hole, your gums just filled it back in, and now I don't have any issues. But for a long time, I had to even have a little syringe. I had to squirt water. You had to keep that again, keep food out of that cavity because bacteria will grow there. All right, so enough talking about the teeth, but we're still talking about the mouth. Okay, so within our mouth, we have several glands. These are endocrine glands or exocrine glands if they are secreting saliva. Exocrine glands. Exocrine glands because they're excreting on the exterior of your body. Yeah, your mouth is the exterior of your body. It's not going into your bloodstream. And they produce amylase. Anything that ends in ASE is what type of a compound? An enzyme, okay? It's going to be breaking things down, increasing, it's a kind of a catalyst to break down materials. And the materials that we're breaking down here is starch. And starch broken down into sugars, okay? Our bodies cannot use starch for cellular respiration. They need sugars, primarily glucose. So the more complex the sugars you eat, the more time it takes your body to break it down. That's why a sweet potato for breakfast versus a regular potato for breakfast will keep you full and with energy a lot longer because it's a polysaccharide versus a monosaccharide. A complex sugar versus a simple sugar takes your body longer to break it down. Okay, so your sugars that you're eating in candy, okay, they are going to be broken down almost immediately inside of your mouth and in your stomach, and so you're going to get really a lot of sugar in your blood right away. That's why our friends whose bodies don't respond anymore to insulin, they use those candies or juice because that sugar is easily broken down and they can get it to the bloodstream if they're low. Another function of the saliva we've talked about before is lubrication. Okay, try swallowing a pill without water. A big one, as my son would say. Okay, I actually have been able to swallow a Tums dry. Just because I'm gonna try it. That's my skills. I swallow pills dry. You take them often enough, it's pretty easy to swallow them. But it hurt. It was not comfortable. And so if you swallow pills with water, it's a lot easier to go down. Right. Same thing with saliva. If you have a dry mouth and your body's not producing enough saliva, it's gonna be hard to swallow food, and you might feel like you're choking. And some materials actually still stick. Peanut butter kind of feels like it's kind of stuck in your throat. Your body it's got the oils in it, so it's hydrophilic. It's kind of separating from. The peanut butter separates from the saliva, so it's not able to lubricate very much. So it's kind of hard to swallow, but that's another function of the salivary glands. And you can see we have three of them there. The parotid, the submandibular. Why? Oh, I know. It's underneath it's in your mandible, underneath your teeth. And then the sublingual, it's underneath the tongue. The lingual tongue helps you talk language. I don't know. Whatever works for me. All right, so the parotid salivary gland is actually right here, right behind the ear. You can see it excretes saliva on the top of your mouth. The submandibular and sublingual are secreting saliva in the bottom of your mouth, and that's kind of strange here. Look at this tube. It's got a tube, the duct going all the way to the front of your mouth, building that saliva up, and this one comes right underneath your tongue. All right, so we talked about this earlier. Why do you and your dog drool? All right, when you see, smell, even think about food, nerve signals are sent to create saliva. Remember, it's anticipating, I'm going to eat. And so I want to be able to make sure that it's going to get broken down because I got to be able to eat more food. Yeah, my dog does that too. It's a Labrador trait. They just have this shape of their mouth where it just drools down. So yeah, you smell. I'm just thinking about pizza right now. I'm going to have pizza for supper. And I'm drooling because pizza's got sugar in it. Okay, so I'm going to be able to break it down. All right, so moving behind the mouth, okay, is the pharynx. The pharynx is this connection between the respiratory system and the digestive system, right? So it's this area where we can connect this nasal passage and our mouth, all right? So we have this oral cavity which is where our mouth goes, or where the food and air can be breathed in. And then we have where it's going to divide the pharynx is into the larynx and the esophagus. All right, so the larynx is going to be taking in air, hopefully, and esophagus is going to be taking in food. And we have actually three different parts of the pharynx. We have the nasal pharynx, nasal, nose, the oropharynx, oral cavity, mouth, all right, and the laryngeal pharynx, which is this middle spot where they're connecting. All right, so after we made it through the pharynx, we're down to the esophagus. All right, so those peristaltic movements, that the waving motions, is going to move food down to the stomach, and it actually passes through right here, this muscle, the diaphragm, which is separating the pleural cavities and from the abdominal cavity. And the hiatus is where it goes to the diaphragm. We can see this in the kitty cats too when we dissect cats. And the sphincter is a muscle that constricts. All right, so this lower esophageal sphincter should be closed except when we swallow food, and it opens. And actually, if you swallow, one thing that we'll do in class, you can do at home too. If you have stethoscope, is put the stethoscope right below where your xiphoid process would be, because that's about where this esophageal sphincter is, and you swallow water, and you can listen, and you hear it splash, and it'll wait until there's a little food there, and then the lower esophageal sphincter will open up, and then let your food down. Okay, so this should stay closed because your stomach is lined to stay protected against the acid that it produces, the stomach chyme, to dissolve your food. But your esophagus is not designed to have that acid in it. So acid reflux disease, that's where the acid comes up out of your stomach and it actually erodes the esophagus, and it can cause some damage. And if not taken care of, could be permanent. All right, so after we pass the esophagus through the esophageal sphincter, we're into the stomach. All right, so this is going to receive the food, water, whatever it is you swallow, and it's going to mix it up with gastric juice. All right, so the sugar digestion started in the mouth, and it's going to be continued in the stomach, and then the stomach starts dissolving proteins and actually starts absorbing some nutrients. Some of those simple sugars can go right to the stomach wall. All right, that's why our diabetic friends, they are need to have some sugar because they're a little low. Okay, the stomach starts absorbing that. Small materials, and actually things that are already broken down or don't need broken down. All right, so another one that's absorbed through the wall of the stomach, not even a nutrient, I guess, but it's a material, water and alcohol. All right, so if you consume alcohol, you'll feel the effects very quickly because it absorbs straight through the wall of the stomach. And then after it passes through the stomach, that's the alcohol. You take it slow. Of course, right now you're not drinking, but when you start drinking, take it slow if you do choose to do so, because that alcohol, they don't feel the effects right now. Once it hits your small intestine, it gets absorbed very quickly, and then you feel it, and then the effects can get very sick. So a region of the stomach, all right, so we have the cardiac. It's really right below the heart. That's a good way to remember why it's the cardiac. That's where this opening is, right here. The fundic, it's temporary storage. Okay, there should not be food up here all the time. So if you consume a lot of food really quickly, all right, we will need this area right here. And this also is a place where the acid actually should not be very often. So the fatty part that's protecting the stomach is not very thick right here, and so we can have some damage. So the body is in between the fundus, the fundic area, and the pyloric area, which is where it's going to be dumping into the small intestine, right? So you can see there's lots of folds in the stomach. I wonder why there'd be lots of folds in the stomach. And number one, you can see it right here. It increases surface area. Why do we need more surface area? More surface area, more absorption. All right, so it can absorb more food, more water. It can also secrete more gastric juice more quickly if there's more surface area to do that. And then the pyloric area is where the stomach narrows, and eventually there's a valve right here. Again, it's a sphincter that's going to release food into the small intestine. All right, so inside of the stomach, we have mucus, and this mucus's job is to prevent the stomach from digesting itself. That's not good. You should not digest yourself. At least those parts that you're gonna need forever. Okay, yeah, you have a temporary fat storage that needs digested because you're not consuming food 24 hours a day, so your body does digest some parts of you. We talked about the glucose, the sugar cycle, which we store in our liver and other tissues. So we do need to digest that food, but your stomach needs to be there. So this mucus, it's a basic material. It's a base, of course, counteracts the effects of acids. Really neutralizes the acid because the acid needs to be reacting with your food. All right, and then these gastric glands within the mucus lining. You can see the glands here, the glandular cells. Okay, they release the gastric juices, and they can come up through the gastric pit and start breaking down food. So pepsin starts with the P, dissolves, reacts with proteins, and starts breaking down food. Because once it gets into the small intestine, we need to start absorbing it really quickly. And of course, the small intestine isn't going to break down more itself. All right, so here's the purpose. Another purpose of the rugae. All right, these folds, you can see that as they extend the stomach out, make it bigger, the folds disappear. All right, so another reason for the surface area is it increases the space. So after you eat stomach, you have you talk about the food baby. All right, that's your stomach is distended. Distended means it's full, and it's all those the rugae have flattened out to increase the area to hold more food. So evolutionarily, when we found food, we had to eat it because it was going to go bad or someone else is going to steal it. So that would be why we need to have extra space. Now we really have no reason to be doing that that causes stomach ache. But yeah, if you choose to do so, you may, because your stomach has the rugae to do that. Now within the food, once the food has been broken down a little bit, it's now called chyme, and it's kind of pasty. Again, it's the same consistency as toothpaste, but it probably has a different scent. Yeah, much different scent. All right, so once it's been broken down by the gastric juices, it's released through the pyloric sphincter valve. All right, it's another sphincter, another muscle that can dilate and constrict into the duodenum. All right, and the duodenum is the first part of the small intestine. But as the food is being dumped into the small intestine, okay, here's where I've been telling people my friends who are very disappointed with their pancreas function when helping them regulate sugar, it's still helping you out, all right? The pancreas, yes, releases insulin to tell your cells to absorb sugar, but it also releases 4 other types of enzymes that help break down your food. This pancreatic juice breaks down many nutrients, and also it's basic again. What do bases do to acids? They neutralize them. So because the duodenum of the small intestine does not have that mucous membrane, does not have a fatty membrane to be protected from the acids. So we need to protect it and neutralize the acid that was coming from the stomach. Okay, it's done its job. It's broke down the food. So we don't need it anymore. It's going to start neutralizing it. All right, so the pancreatic amylase breaks down carbohydrates. Again, amylase. Where do we have that? The salivary glands. Okay, so it's also breaking down carbohydrates, breaking them down more. Pancreatic lipase. We have lipids. Lipids is the macromolecule that makes fats. So it helps break those down to smaller materials. We need fats. Okay, our cell membranes are made of fats. Phospholipids. Okay, so we need fats to make new cells. But fats also help our bodies function. The myelin and neurons are made of fats. We need to break them down. You can use them for cellular respiration. We can also use them to make new materials, but also we need ATP. And fats can actually be made into a lot of ATP. Pancreatic nucleases break down nucleic acid molecules into nucleotides. What are nucleotides for? Scan the class. DNA. All right, your food has DNA in it. Remember in biology class when we took the strawberries, we mashed it up, we added sugar and soap to it, and then we put the cold alcohol in it, and we could see there was DNA in our food. Yeah, that's where your DNA comes from. It comes from your food. You need to make new cells. Mitosis is the dividing of the nucleus into 2 daughter cells. All right, we need DNA, so we get the DNA from our food. All right, and it's no problem. We can break it down and make it into our own DNA-ification. Okay, and then we have proteolytic enzymes. They break down You can see it right in the root. Proteins, okay, continue broken down of proteins. We started breaking down some proteins with pepsin in our stomach, and going to continue to do so in the small intestine, right? And by the time it gets to the large intestine, okay, hopefully it's broken down enough that there's nothing else that we need from it. And then these pancreatic juices being released is regulated by the nervous system and the endocrine system, right? So this is a kind of we talked about this is a kind of an endocrine gland, all right? So the endocrine glands are, of course, controlled by the pituitary gland in your brain. And who controls the pituitary gland? The hypothalamus, all right? So that's how the nervous system regulates the pancreas. You can see here, it's also, besides just you got two different ways for materials to move, right? You have blood vessels that take the hormones out, and then you have this duct that takes out the pancreatic juices. Okay, so the liver, all right? So liver is also butted off from the alimentary canal, all right? It is going to help be breaking down food. It's got two lobes. It's actually one of the bigger organs in your body besides your skin. It might even be the second biggest organ besides your skin. And it's got a duct. So it's the liver is gonna be creating bile, and the bile is stored in the gallbladder. I think we're gonna talk about this a little later, but bile is used to break down fats as well, and also neutralizes the blood. The gastric juices. Let's see, I think I have a slide on that. Yeah, all right. So we have all these parts of the biliary system, right? So this can help us break down food. So the liver, yes, helps break down food. So this biliary system consists of the liver, gallbladder, and ducts. All right, so the liver produces the bile. The ducts transport the bile. If we don't need the bile right away, you got a place to store it. Hey, gallbladder. All right, that's why they say you don't need the gallbladder. It's helpful if you consume fats. Folks that have had gallbladders removed, they tell you that they cannot eat as many fats as they used to, but they still can. But they would get a little more stomach discomfort because their body's not able to produce enough bile. That's why we have this reserve when we need it. Okay, and we have the cystic duct. That duct that's going to be connecting the gallbladder to this biliary duct. So if it's not going to be going down in here, it's going to be stored into the bile, and then the gallbladder, and then it can squeeze it out through this duct, and it can mean this common bile duct where the bile gets dumped into the stage of the duodenum. You can see it runs right and dumps right where the pancreas was dumping, and the hepatic duct. Okay, so these ducts actually become blocked. That's where a gallbladder typically gets infected, where it has to be removed. Is this cystic duct gets blocked or clogged. The gallstones, that happens, and if the gallstones happen, it blocks this area and it becomes infected, and you got to remove the gallbladder. That's why the gallbladder gets removed. But all of this bile gets dumped into the duodenum, all right? And the bile is going to help break down food, fats. All right, so several functions of the liver. Number one, blood glucose levels, all right? Glycogen, glucagon, right? So if the glucose is not being used, it's going to be stored in the liver, and we can use it later. It breaks down lipids and fats. It also stores some of those things. It's releasing bile, which is going to help break down the lipids and fats. Protein metabolism, we're breaking down protein. So it's lots of functions. Stores vitamins. Okay, we don't need vitamins all the time, but we might need them. And vitamins, evolutionarily over time, we're kind of rare, and it's one of the things that most things our body cannot make. The only thing our body cannot make, and one of them is vitamins. And so once we have it in our food, or if we've been able to make it, we're going to store it, so just in case we need it for later. It also recycles red blood cells. As red blood cells wear out, they're going to take those pieces, those parts of the red blood cells, break them down, and then we can use them later to make new red blood cells or for whatever we need to do. It removes toxins. All right. You've heard people talking about before, like what a liver. Maybe you've seen pictures of what a liver looks like of a person who has consumed far too much alcohol versus a healthy liver, and eventually that wears that liver down. Toxins also include medications. So it's hard on your liver or your kidneys both if you consume too much painkillers, because if they don't get used by your body, they actually have to get metabolized by something, because it can be toxic to the rest of your body. So the liver helps that. And of course, secretes bile. And it's actually this yellow, greeny liquid. And that's why a lot of times you see the gallbladder shown as like this green organ, because that's what bile kind of looks like. And it breaks down food. And actually, bile can be farmed too. I've seen pictures of I'm definitely not going to call it humane, but people farm it with like bears because the bile, our bodies can use their bile. But also some people think it has medicinal purposes. There's your joke. What is it, gallbladder? Can't you see I have a lot to do? I made these. You made stones. You're not supposed to hold on to what I give to you. Get out. Make stones. That's when the gallbladder gets hurt, and then they removed it. That's why they get out. All right, so Billy Lights. Never heard of this before. Like jaundice. You know, like, I don't know if you can tell what color his skin is. Like my great uncle, Uncle Vern. He actually had liver cancer. And his body eventually, when I went and saw him the last time I saw him in the hospital, his skin was completely yellow. That's what jaundice. And so Billy Lights help break down. The body can dissolve those tissues. And so, yeah, the characteristic of this jaundice is the eyes seriously are yellow. And same with the skin. That's what the jaundice of the skin is, this yellowish color. Okay, the small intestine. All right, so its main function, absorption of nutrients. All right, so it can absorb food and water. And also vitamins. All right, we've got three parts. We have the duodenum. We've heard the duodenum already. That's where the stomach dumps the chyme in, and it's also where the materials from the liver and the pancreas are dumped in. The jejunum is where most of the absorption is going to happen. So the duodenum takes on the stomach chyme. The jejunum is going to be absorbing a lot of food, and it's got mesentery attached to it. You can see it says supports the coils of small intestine and contains blood vessels. Why does it contain blood vessels? To absorb the food, all right? Move the food away from the jejunum and out to the rest of the body, whether we're going to store it as fat temporarily or consume it right now to get ATP, all right? But we need it. And then the ileum, that's where the food is going to start not being food anymore, but it's going to be more of a waste. And then the large intestine comes into play. And I guess this actually isn't a human intestine, it's dog intestine, but it would look very comparable. And same with the cat, so it will look very comparable when we get to that point. All right, so the greater omentum, it's actually a storage of fat, right? So it's connected right to the mesentery, so we can move that material right away into this greater omentum. And we'll see it in the cats. And then actually females have a larger omentum than males. Why do you think that might be? Well, females are capable of having a baby, and after their first ovulation, okay, they can have a baby at any point, and so they have a little energy, extra energy stored just in case, because having a baby takes a lot of energy. Believe me. Totally worth it though. All right, so the greater omentum, you can see the size of it. Thank you, Dr. Oz. Okay, so within the small intestine, we have these villi. Okay, so we have villi versus cilia. Remember, cilia are the little hairs that move materials. Villi increase surface area. All right, and then you have villi on top of the villi. It's called microvilli. And so they increase surface area so that we have more material to absorb. Actually, one of the side effects of folks who have celiac disease, and if they consume gluten, their body is attacking themselves. It's another autoimmune disorder. And it actually attacks these villi, and so they're like shades them off. They're gone. And in consequence of that, I think consequence of that would be, well, lower surface area. Lower surface area, less room for absorption. And so they're going to have a harder time digesting materials, and actually, it starts causing some pain. And so these intestinal villi increase the surface area. Here we can see it. This is we looked at the fundic stomach on our slides. Okay, we can see this villi, columnar cells. Columnar. Why would they be columnar? Lots of space to absorb materials, right? And it's got lots of space in here because the food is going to be traveling through the middle of the small intestine, and the small intestine is going to be doing peristalsis, moving the material from the mouth down to the end. But as it's doing that, the food is going to be squishing down in here, and then the microvilli, the food gets in between them. Okay, then it can absorb it into the blood. All right, and after the food's been absorbed, we got it all out. We're going to get rid of it. But before we get rid of it, let's pass it to the large intestine because there's some very valuable materials that we still need to get out of there. So the cecum is the very first part of the small intestine. All right, so in humans, it's very small, and actually, it's the residual part of the cecum is also called the appendix. The appendix, for us, has no function. If you remember back in biology class, the cecum for herbivores is a lot bigger. Remember why? Contained bacteria to break down vegetation. Okay, vegetation has more cellulose in it. Like we cannot break down cellulose and get energy, but cattle can, and so can the koala. Koala, which only consumes eucalyptus, which is inedible to most other mammals. They have a large cecum, and that secretes of that bacteria. The food can go up into the cecum and get absorbed and broken down into more sugar. Cellulose is another sugar. And its attached part is the appendix. Right, the colon, which is the rest of the large intestine, is divided into 4 parts. Ascending because it does go up. Okay, it's going against gravity, and it does more peristalsis to move it up. Transcending, it's going from the transverse portion. So when it crosses across your gut, okay, we'll see these parts in the cat, and then descending, it's where the waste moves down. Right, and that's to help us get rid of it. I mean, a lot of folks, even like children, they have issues with eliminating those materials using the bathroom. So we have some help in that it moves down. Gravity does help out there. On the rectum, that's where some of that waste is going to be stored temporarily before we get rid of it. And of course, what's going to help push it out is the gravity of the material on top. This is never empty. There's always material in here, and we'll see that in the cat. So we can cut it open, and there'll be waste through the whole thing, unless they've been not had any food. Okay, then it would be empty. But you're consuming food, and what pushes the food past is more food. All right, and then the anus, that's where there's a sphincter which controls the exit of waste. And like any other muscle in your body, this one can be wore out. All right, so and it's actually can be desensitized. So if you have this feeling that you have to go. Because after a while, if you ignore that sensation, your body will not sense it anymore. So you could have problems. You go into the bathroom. All right, so the function of the large intestine, all right, that material that needs absorbed still is water. All right, so but to move the materials, we got to again secrete more mucus. We need to lubricate it so that we can get through. All right, that's one thing. Like children, one thing the doctors try first if children are struggling to use the restroom is called mineral oil, and mineral oil is a material that your body cannot reabsorb, and so it helps lubricate anyways, and also keeps the the poop a little more liquidy, so it's easier to pass. But it's going to again reabsorb that water. Water, evolutionarily, clean water, fresh water is kind of rare, and so if we have it, we want to get as much back as possible. It also contains bacteria. You've heard about that your natural flora. Flora is the bacteria in your gut, and if you kill the bacteria in your gut, it's gone. Right, so that's one consequence of antibiotics, overusing antibiotics. Every time you use antibiotics, it kills the bacteria, the bad stuff, the ones causing strep throat, but it also kills the good bacteria that helps you break down your food. And if it gets killed, right, it's actually an empty, like think about it, if you have a vacant house, a vacant space, someone can move in. And that's what happens with bacteria. Your cells, like I told you this before, you were outnumbered by bacteria. And so if your body if you kill bacteria with antibiotics, another bacteria moves in, and it could be one that's not good. But so the probiotics, the purpose of those is to kind of inoculate your body with some of the bacteria that are good for you. And actually, no one's poo is the same. What? Yeah, no one's poo is the same, and that's because everyone's fauna in their stomach is different. Or excuse me, not their stomach. Their large intestine is different. Okay, enough talking about bacteria. Poop. Actually, one more talk about poop. Mass movements, all right? Defecation, that's doing number 2, right? That removes the undigested food from the rectum. But again, its main job is to reabsorb water. Oh, there's the cecum, in case you didn't remember. So it's a coyote. Canis latrans versus a koala. I can't remember their scientific name. Or any herbivore, they have a much larger cecum because they need to break down these cellulose because that's mostly what this food is. It's indigestible. Seriously, there's not much to it. That's why eucalyptus forests are so important to the koalas. All right, so yeah, you can actually tell a lot of your health from your stool, from the fecal matter. So the Bristol stool chart. It kind of indicates how healthy you are, right? So there's types 1 through 7. Bristol is the doctor who named it. So number 1, these separate hard lumps. And you're probably between 1 and 2. You're probably constipated. type 3 through 4 as ideal. Okay, this is what your fecal matter should look like. If you are consuming a correct amount of materials, if you don't have any infections. And type 5, type 6, type 7, that's when that's considered diarrhea. And it's considered diarrhea. Well, what's happening here, you think? What's the main job of the large intestine? Reabsorb water. All right, so diarrhea, we don't have as much water reabsorbed. Number one, maybe it's because we had food poisoning and our body's like, we don't want to keep the stuff in here. It's trying to kill us. Get it out. So if it gets it out quicker, it can't absorb the water as quickly. But if you've got a bacterial infection, your body's just trying to flush everything out. And so it's just going to move it out faster than it should. But also, if there's not much consistency to it, not consuming enough fiber. You've heard about fiber before. Fiber actually is what's in the cellulose, especially like in celery. Celery. All right. It gives your gosh, I keep blanking on that word. Gives your poop, fecal matter. Thank you. Fecal matter more of a consistency, so it's easier to pass. Yeah, there's your senior gift. You'll be getting one of those in the mail from me soon. Nutrition. All right. So actually, this is where we're going to stop this video because it's getting a little long. All right. So we will pick up on nutrition in the next